Sometimes when my patients come into the clinic for their annual physicals, they get a little bit more than they bargained for, because I often can't help myself and end up giving them a little bit of an anatomy lesson on the human heart and the cardiovascular system. And this isn't just because I'm a nerd and love teaching anatomy. It's because cardiovascular diseases are the leading cause of death globally, taking an estimated 17.9 million lives every year. So clearly, it's a good idea for pretty much everyone to do what they can to reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease as much as possible. And yes, one can greatly reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease and improve longevity with cardiovascular exercise. But what is the best type of cardio? Is it zone 2 steady state cardio? Is it short, high intensity intervals? Is it VO2 max training sessions? And how often do you need to do it each week? Well, in today's video, we're going to answer all of these questions, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently than we've done it in some of our previous videos. Yes, we'll still use the cadavers in the lab to discuss some of the relevant anatomy and the physiological adaptations, but we have received a lot of requests from people to actually show them how to implement some of these cardio sessions. So today I'm going to show you how to do these training sessions on the YESOUL G1M PLUS bike, the YESOUL R1M PLUS rowing machine, and the YESOUL T1M PLUS treadmill, sent to us from the sponsor of today's video, YESOUL. So we'll review some of the cool features of these machines and how they can be used to improve your cardiovascular health and fitness, and discuss how they compare to some of the more expensive machines out there. So let's do this. So before we talk about the best or most effective forms of cardio, we do need to acknowledge that getting out and doing pretty much any type of cardiovascular training is going to improve your cardiovascular health and fitness to some level, especially if you're just starting out. You're going to get benefits from steady state cardio, VO2 max sessions, high intensity intervals, and even just going out and playing various sports. But if we are talking about efficiency and kind of getting your best bang for buck with your cardio training, there are certain types of cardio, two in particular, that tend to check the most boxes when it comes to physiologic adaptations that result in some of the best long-term health and fitness benefits. And the first type that we'll talk about and show you builds your foundation, or what you can think of as your aerobic base. And this is steady state cardio, meaning you would do this at a constant or steady level of intensity throughout the entirety of the session. And this is at a moderate level of intensity, often referred to as zone 2, which equates to about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Some exercise physiology texts will say 65 to 75% of your max heart rate, but I'll give you some other parameters to help you know if you're in zone 2. But why is zone 2, or building your aerobic base, so important? And why are so many people, including myself, talking about it so much lately? Well, it's actually nothing new, as the endurance athletes have been doing this type of training long before any content creators were making any videos about it. But the fact that many of the best endurance athletes in the world often spend as much as 80% of their cardio training in zone 2 is a testament to how important this type of training is, because building your aerobic base not only prepares your body for other high intensity sessions that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but it also produces some incredible physiological adaptations that result in some of the best long-term cardiovascular health and fitness benefits. And many of these benefits result from changes in this incredible organ, which, as you can see, is the human heart. When we exercise, the myocardium, this muscular portion of the heart made up of cardiac muscle fibers, gets stronger. And you can kind of think of zone 2 training as building up your baseline heart strength. And when the heart gets stronger, this results in more blood being pumped with each beat, which obviously will result in increased fitness, but also because the heart is now stronger and pumping more blood with each beat, the heart is more efficient. And this results in a lower and improved resting heart rate, because instead of the heart needing, say, like 65 beats per minute to pump a given amount of blood, in its stronger and more efficient state, it may now only need 55 beats per minute to pump that same amount of blood. And so as you can see, a stronger heart can pump more blood with less effort, which also means less force and pressure placed upon the blood vessels, and this is one of the reasons why cardio can also improve blood pressure. So how do you set up a zone 2 training session? Well, as we mentioned, it's of a moderate intensity of about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. But if you don't have like a watch or some other way to monitor your heart rate, you can use another metric, and this is why I'm actually showing you how to do this on the bike right now, because the next metric is the talk test. And the talk test is pretty much during zone 2, you should be able to hold a full conversation with a training partner, people you're doing a YouTube video with, or somebody maybe you're on the phone with. And sometimes people will say, like, that person on the other end of the phone would know that you're exercising. You're able to hold the conversation, but they can tell you're breathing heavier, like you can with me right now. And so that's a good free metric to figure out if you're in zone 2. If you're starting to get to a point where you're needing to take more breaths in between 1 or 2 words, then you're definitely getting into those higher zones and you've moved out of zone 2. So talk test is a very good metric. And then the next thing that you could use, say with like this bike, is you'll start to notice your watt range that you're in with the talk test and if you're using your heart rate. And so you can use your heart rate percentage, you can use the talk test, and then you can kind of see where you are with your watts to maintain that zone 2 throughout the entirety of the session. And that's something that's also very important. You don't want to be having your heart rate fluctuate all over the place where you're at 90% of your max heart rate for 1 second and then you're down to 50% and then you're like, oh, I averaged 67% of my max heart rate. That's not what you want to do. You want to keep it within that narrow range, steady state. And the other thing is that you could do this on the rower, you could do this on the treadmill. The rower has watts that you could utilize. Same idea, do the talk test. The treadmill, pretty straightforward as well. You could look at the speed, and you'll notice as you get more fit that you'll produce more watts at the same level of effort or that same heart rate or during that talk test. You know, you do this for 3 months or so, you get on the treadmill, you're at 60 to 70% of your max heart rate, but your speed is going up because your fitness is improving. And these sessions tend to be longer, 30 to 60 minutes. And so sometimes it's nice to have an HD screen in front of you so you can watch the greatest sitcom of all time. And it still keeps your metrics in the top left corner there where it tells you your resistance, which this bike is very smooth with these adjustments. And so you can adjust your resistance with this knob here. And then it also shows you your RPM, your calories, and your distance. And it has some pretty immersive sound here.
See, that's the great thing. We're out as friends. This is not a date. Sex is off the table.
Whoops.
So, let's go.
Maybe some other part that we could use. But you've got this nice front speaker as well as 2 rear speakers, again, to give you that immersive sound. And now let's discuss the other type of cardio training that takes our cardiovascular health and fitness even further. And that is VO2 max training intervals. VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen that you can consume during exercise. And so the higher your VO2 max is, the more oxygen you can consume, which translates to a greater top end in your aerobic capacity in cardiovascular fitness. And we can improve our VO2 max with periods of high intensity aerobic exercise alternated with periods of rest. And these intervals are going to be anywhere from 3 to 8 minutes long. And I personally like doing 4x4s, and I'll show you how to set that up in just a second. But how does this type of training further stimulate adaptations in our cardiovascular system on top of what we're getting from zone 2? Well, remember how we said that one of the things building your aerobic base with zone 2 training did was to build your baseline strength in your heart. Well, kind of think of VO2 max specific training as taking your heart strength to the next level, essentially training your heart to be even stronger at the top end. An analogy we could use that if you were to, say, lift weights at only 60 to 70% of your 1 rep max, yes, you would get stronger to a certain level, just like your heart will get stronger to a certain level with zone 2 training. But if you never lifted close to your maximum, you wouldn't maximize your muscle strength. And in this case, you wouldn't maximize your heart strength, because by the last interval, if you set this up right, you should hit or get close to your max heart rate. And so again, this is a challenging exercise session that you're going to get an additional benefit of building some mental fortitude with. Plus, the correlation you see with VO2 max and the 10-year risk reduction for all-cause mortality is remarkable. Essentially, research shows that the better your VO2 max, the less likely you are to die over a 10-year period from any disease or condition. And I'll post that specific research study in the description. But now, to the 4x4. So how do we set up this 4x4, this 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, doing it a total of 4 times? Well, I like doing mine on the treadmill, but you could definitely do it on the rower as well as the bike. I like the treadmill because I just like setting the incline and the speed, hitting the timer, and just keeping up with the belt for those 4 minutes. With the rower and the bike, you'd obviously do it for 4 minutes as well, but you'd just be monitoring watts rather than speed. Now, what's also cool about these machines is because they have this wired screen mirroring, I can go into any app on my phone, and for this particular session, I just try to get into the mental zone here, and I just put my timer on the screen and I go, because honestly it's intense and I'm just waiting for the time to end. So let's do our first session here. How I do this is I'll get on and I'll increase the speed. Now the speed will vary from person to person depending on your fitness. You could be at 7 miles per hour, 8 miles per hour, 9 miles per hour, anywhere in between there. But I'm going to set mine here. As soon as I get there, we will start the timer and go. Okay, so you'll definitely fail the talk test doing a VO2 max session, but one thing that's important to note is that you've got to do 4 of these. If you come out way too hot on the first interval, you're not going to make it all the way through the last interval. So the first and second interval, you actually feel like you might have a little bit left in the tank, but if you set this up right, by the 4th interval, you're definitely starting to question your exercise choices in life, because again, if you set it up right, those last 10 to 15 seconds you are pushing through, you're fighting the need and the desire to stop. And the goal that I usually try to get by that 4th session is to touch or at least hit my max heart rate. And so hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how to set it up on the treadmill. Now, like I mentioned earlier, with the bike and the rower, you're going to have to monitor your watts and push really hard through those, because you don't have a belt to just keep your legs moving. And so when people do it out on the track or on bikes or rowers, I'll admit it takes a little bit more discipline to keep going when you don't have a belt pushing you through that. So let's talk about how to integrate these VO2 max and zone 2 workouts into your weekly routine. But real quick, let me touch on a few more features of the YESOUL bike, rower, and treadmill. We already saw the cool free unlimited screencasting and immersive audio with the 6-watt dual speakers, plus the screen can rotate 360 degrees if needed. All this allows users to enjoy their favorite shows or music while exercising, or you can even join a cardio class with an instructor on the YESOUL app. Something else to keep in mind about these machines is that they are made to fit in small households. You could think of one of YESOUL's mottos as being small space, big impact, because these are compact machines that are foldable and easy to move, yet greatly impact your cardiovascular health. And of course, the biggest question, are they worth it? I think for someone on a budget, they are definitely worth it. These are significantly less expensive than other products with screens such as the Peloton and the Hydro Rower. You may not get every single feature of the more expensive product, but the much lower price makes the YESOUL machines a great cost-effective alternative. But again, how do we incorporate these workouts into your routine? Well, you want to do at least 2 to 3 hours per week of Zone 2 training and 1 VO2 max training session each week. And then ideally mix in some strength and resistance training in between. And so I've got this chart that gives you some examples of how to incorporate these cardio training sessions into your weekly routine. Week A would be something that a beginner could start with, building up the time of each Zone 2 session. So the first week, you may do 30 minutes each session, then the next week 35 or 40 minutes, until you get up to a total of those 2 to 3 hours for Zone 2 each week. And then once you get to that point, you incorporate the VO2 max sessions. And I've got a link to a PDF of this chart in the description for even more details on weeks B, C, and D if you want to check that out below. So hopefully you all learned some useful information about how to incorporate these cardio sessions into your workout routine. And to help you with this journey of cardiovascular improvement, be sure to check out the YESOUL equipment featured in today's video by checking out the link in the description and using our coupon code HUMAN100. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video.